Welcome to Unlocking Passion. Men Report. Let's begin with a new story. Helmut Schneider stood in the blazing midday heat on a vacant plot of land near Jamtien and stared at the dusty, neglected ground where the small luxury resort was supposedly supposed to stand, the one for which he had invested 450,000 euros from the sale of his family business. The GPS coordinates Ploy had given him led to this abandoned parcel, with no sign of construction work, no foundations, no building materials, not even the slightest indication that anything was ever meant to be built here. Only endless silence, broken by the chirping of crickets and the distant barking of stray dogs. His phone still showed her last message from a week earlier. Dearest Helmut, the construction workers are making great progress. Soon we can open our resort and be happy together. I think about our future every day. But her number was now dead. Her Line account showed users not found. Her Facebook profile had been deleted. And the 28-year-old woman who, for 3 months, had made him feel like a successful businessman and a desirable man, who had spoken about our resort and our life together, had disappeared without a trace, as if she had never existed. He was 71 years old, standing alone in a foreign country, 8,000 kilometers from Hamburg. After transferring his entire savings to a woman whose real name he would probably never know, and all that remained to him was 160,000 euros in his account, and the devastating realization that the golden retirement he had imagined had turned into a nightmare from which there was no waking up. If you like the stories I create, I would be very happy if you press the subscribe button. Your support is crucial for the growth of this channel and helps me find time for these videos, even though I work a full-time job. Thank you very much for being here. Helmut Schneider was what people in Germany would call a self-made man, even though he himself would never have used that term. Born in 1953 in a working-class district of Hamburg, he had dedicated his life to building something solid, something that would last. At the age of 18, he began an apprenticeship as a metalworker at a small company in Wilhelmsburg. And even then, his talent for precise work and his sharp business sense became clear. At the age of 30, after 12 years of hard work and merciless saving, Helmut founded his own small company for metal processing. Schneider Metallbau GmbH specialized in custom steel structures for industrial construction, stairs, railings, and hall constructions. The work was hard, the competition brutal, but Helmut had something many others did not have: absolute reliability. If Helmut Schneider said a structure would be delivered on the 15th, then it was delivered on the 15th. If he said something would cost 20,000 marks, then it cost 20,000 marks. For more than 40 years, he built up this reputation, employed up to 15 workers, often worked 60 hours a week, and sacrificed vacations and weekends for the business. His company never became huge, but it was profitable, solid, and respected. The major construction companies in Hamburg knew his name and knew that a structure from Schneider Metallbau would hold. He married a woman named Greta at the age of 24, the daughter of a fellow craftsman and friend. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and 1 son. Greta ran the household and handled the company's bookkeeping while Helmut was on construction sites. It was a traditional marriage, a practical partnership, perhaps more than a love story, but it worked for almost 50 years. Then, 3 years ago, Greta died of pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came in May, and by August she was dead. Helmut barely had time to grasp the reality before his wife of 45 years was suddenly no longer there. The apartment they had lived in for 30 years became a museum full of memories that suffocated him. His children, all now in their 40s, with families of their own, lived their own lives. His eldest daughter, Sabine, had moved to Munich and contacted him perhaps twice a year. His second daughter, Petra, still lived in Hamburg, but she had little time for him, always busy with her job as a pharmacist and her two teenagers. His son, Marcus, whom Helmut had always hoped would take over the business, had studied computer science and worked for a startup in Berlin, completely uninterested in metalworking. The relationship with his children was complicated and painful. Helmut had been a hard, demanding father who had little time for emotions or tenderness. He had believed that providing security and financial stability was enough to be a good father. His children saw it differently. They remembered a father who was always working, who never came to school events, who took their successes for granted and criticized their mistakes. After Greta's death, Helmut waited for his children to take more care of him, to support him in his grief. But the calls became less frequent instead of more frequent. The visits did not happen. When he complained, Petra said coldly to him, "Papa, you were never there for us when we needed you. Why should we be there for you now?" Those words hit Helmut like a hammer blow. He had worked his whole life to provide security for his family, and now, when he needed them, they left him in the lurch. At the age of 68, Helmut decided to sell the business. Without a successor in the family, and without the energy needed to run the company for more years, it no longer made sense. A larger company that wanted his customer portfolio and his good reputation offered him 650,000 euros. It was a fair price for 4 decades of hard work. With the proceeds from the sale and his savings, Helmut now had about 800,000 euros. Combined with his monthly pension of 10,500 euros, he could have lived a comfortable retirement in Germany. But Germany felt cold, empty, bleak. The apartment was full of ghosts. His children largely ignored him. His old business partners were retired or dead. The long, dark winters in Hamburg became unbearable. Helmut began researching retirement abroad online. Thailand kept appearing again and again. Warm weather, low prices, a large German expatriate community. But more than the practical side, what attracted Helmut were the stories of men who had begun a new life there, who found respect and companionship, who did not feel like useless old men thrown away by their own families. At 69, Helmut flew to Thailand for the first time for a 2-week exploratory vacation. He stayed mainly in Pattaya, a coastal city south of Bangkok, known for its large expatriate community. The city was loud, chaotic, sometimes vulgar, but it was also alive in a way Hamburg no longer was. He met other German retirees in beer gardens and restaurants, men who had stories similar to his own, divorced or widowed, estranged from their children, searching for warmth and meaning. They told him about the advantages of living in Thailand: low living costs, friendly people, sun all year round. When Helmut flew back to Hamburg after 2 weeks, he had already decided that he would move permanently to Thailand. There was nothing left holding him in Germany. Within 6 months, he had sold his apartment, donated or given away most of his furniture, and kept only the most important personal belongings. His children showed little interest in his move. Sabine said, If that's what you think, Papa. Good luck. Petra half-heartedly warned him about scammers. Marcus did not even respond to his email. At the age of 70, Helmut Schneider landed in Bangkok with a suitcase full of clothes, 800,000 euros in his German bank account, and the firm conviction that he would finally experience the golden retirement he deserved. He had no idea that, in less than a year, he would be left with almost nothing. Helmut first rented an apartment in Yomtien, a quieter suburb of Pattaya, for 20,000 baht a month, about 550 euros. The apartment was modern, air-conditioned, with a balcony and a view of the sea. For Helmut, who was used to paying high rents in Hamburg, this felt like unbelievable luxury at a fraction of the cost. He spent his first week settling in, exploring the area, and meeting other German expats. Most were friendly and helpful, giving him tips about banks, visa extensions, and where to buy good German bread. But Helmut was not satisfied with simply existing in Thailand and spending his days drinking beer and having meaningless conversations. He had been an entrepreneur his whole life, a man who built things, a man who was active. The thought of simply vegetating until he died was unbearable. He began to take an interest in real estate. Thailand was experiencing a boom in tourism, and Pattaya was full of development projects. Everywhere there were construction signs for new condominiums, hotels, and resorts. Helmut, who had dealt with construction projects his whole life, recognized opportunities when he saw them. He attended several real estate fairs in Pattaya, events where developers presented their projects and looked for investors. Most projects seemed too large, too risky, or obviously overpriced to him, but the concept fascinated him. What if he could develop a small project himself? Not something huge, but perhaps a small boutique resort with 6 or 8 rooms. Something he could manage himself, and that would give him a purpose. It was at one of these real estate fairs that he met Nathaman Swisakate, who called herself Ploy. She worked at a booth presenting land and development opportunities in the area around Jomtien. Unlike many other Thai women at the fair, who often served only as decorative hostesses, Ploy spoke fluent English with only a slight accent and actually seemed to know about the projects she was talking about. She was attractive, slim, well-groomed, professionally dressed in a business suit, but what impressed Helmut most was her competence. When he asked questions about development, building permits, and financing, she answered knowledgeably and in detail. "You know your field well," Helmut said in English, impressed. "Are you a real estate agent?" "Yes, I have worked in the real estate industry for 5 years," Ploy replied with a warm smile. "First in Bangkok, now here in Pattaya. I specialize in advising foreign investors who want to develop projects in Thailand." "May I ask what you are looking for?" "I'm not sure," Helmut admitted. "I'm new here, a former businessman from Germany. I'm looking for a way to stay active, maybe develop something. A small resort or guest house, something I can run myself." Ploy's eyes lit up. "Oh, that is very interesting. Many foreigners only want to buy and then be absentee owners. But finding someone who actually wants to be involved is rare. You know, I actually have a perfect project in mind, but I have been looking for the right partner for months." She explained that she had access to a piece of land about 10 minutes from Jomtien Beach, perfect for a small boutique resort. The location was excellent. The demand for smaller, more personal accommodations was rising, and construction costs in Thailand were relatively low. "Why don't you build it yourself?" Helmut asked suspiciously. "Because I do not have enough capital," Ploy answered honestly. "I am good at planning and management, but I do not have the money for the initial investment. That is why I am looking for a partner, someone with financial means and business experience. We could develop the project together." Something about her directness appealed to Helmut. She was not trying to deceive him or sugarcoat reality. She was a businesswoman looking for an investor. That he understood. They exchanged contact information, and Ploy invited him to view the land the next day. The next afternoon, Ploy picked Helmut up in a clean, relatively new Toyota. He drove him about 10 minutes away from Yamtian to an area that was not yet fully developed, but already showed signs of coming growth. New roads were being built, and some modern houses were under construction. The plot of land she showed him was about 2 rai, approximately 3,200 square meters. It was flat, easily accessible, with a decent road nearby. "This land belongs to a friend of my family," Ploy explained. "He wants to sell, but only to someone who will actually build something on it, not to speculators. The price is 3 million baht, about 75,000 euros. For land in this area, that is very fair." Helmut looked at the land with the experienced eye of a man who had dealt with construction projects his whole life. The location was good, not directly on the beach, but close enough to be attractive to tourists who wanted something quieter than central Pattaya. "And what would it cost to build a small resort here?" he asked. Ploy had clearly done her homework. She pulled a folder from her bag and showed him detailed plans. A 2-story building with 8 rooms, a small pool, and a restaurant area. The estimates showed construction costs of about 10 million baht, about 250,000 euros. "That seems realistic," Helmut said, after carefully examining the numbers. "In Germany, construction costs would be twice as high. Thailand is very cost-efficient if you have the right contacts," Ploy said with a smile. "I have worked with good contractors for years, contractors who offer fair prices." Over the next few weeks, Helmut and Ploy met several times, discussed details, and refined the plans. Helmut was impressed by Ploy's professionalism and her knowledge. She seemed truly to understand what it took to run a successful small resort. But their relationship did not remain purely businesslike. Ploy began to become more personal. She told him about her life, her poor background in Udon Thani, her struggle to establish herself as a young Thai woman in the business world. She admired Helmut's success, his experience, his business sense. "You are not like most foreigners here," she said one evening when they had dinner together after a business meeting. "Most only think about bars and young girls. You are a real businessman, someone who understands how to build something." Helmut felt flattered. No one had respected him like that, acknowledged him like that, in years. His own children seemed to see him only as an annoying old man. But Ploy, this intelligent, attractive young woman, saw his value. Their relationship became more intimate, nothing exaggerated or inappropriate, but a growing emotional closeness. Ploy sometimes touched his arm when she laughed. She sent him text messages in the evenings, not only about business, but also about personal things. She called him Kun Helmut, with the tone that conveyed affection. Helmut was smart enough to know that a romantic relationship with a 28-year-old woman was unrealistic, but he could not deny that he was drawn to her not only physically, but emotionally as well. She made him feel as if he mattered, as if his life still had meaning. After 2 months of planning and of their relationship developing, Ploy made her proposal concrete. Helmut, I think we should begin this project, but we need to talk about how we structure it. In Thailand, foreigners cannot own land. You probably already know that. That means the land and the business must be registered in a Thai person's name. In your name, you mean? Helmut said cautiously. Yes, in my name. I understand that this makes you nervous. But I can give you legal documents that protect your investment. A loan agreement stating that you lent the money and are entitled to a percentage of the profits. This is standard practice in Thailand. Helmut had read about these restrictions. He knew that foreign ownership of land in Thailand was complicated, but taking the leap and putting 450,000 euros in the name of a woman he had known for only 2 months was frightening. Helmut, Ploy said, placing her hand on his, her eyes serious. I understand your concerns, but I swear to you, this is a real project. We are building this together. Our resort, our future. I am not cheating you. I would never do that. The combination of her words, her gaze, her touch, and his desperate need to believe her broke his resistance. All right, Helmut said. Let us do it. In the following weeks, things moved quickly. Ploy presented Helmut with documents. A purchase contract for the land, construction plans that appeared to be signed by a licensed architect, cost estimates from construction companies, even permits stamped by government authorities. Helmut, who could not read Thai, had the documents checked by a German lawyer in Pattaya, whom an expat acquaintance had recommended to him. The lawyer looked at the papers and said they looked legitimate, but he warned him, Mr. Schneider, you must understand that even with these documents, your protection is limited. If the woman decides to cheat you, it is very difficult as a foreigner to get your money back. Are you sure you trust this person? I trust her, Helmut said, with more conviction than he felt. The total investment would be 450,000 euros for the land and 375,000 for construction, equipment, and an operating buffer. That was more than half of Helmut's entire fortune. He transferred the money in 2 installments. First, 150,000 euros for the land purchase and the initial construction work. Then, 1 month later, another 300,000 euros for the rest. Ploy gave him confirmations for every transfer, receipts for expenses, and photos of the progress. He saw workers preparing the land, foundations being poured, building materials being delivered. It is going exactly according to plan, Ploy assured him. In 3 months, our resort will be finished. I can hardly wait to open it with you, Helmut. This will be our shared success story. Their relationship had also intensified. They now spent almost every day together, sometimes under the pretext of business meetings, but often simply to spend time with each other. They went to dinner, took trips to temples and markets, spent evenings on Helmut's balcony, and talked about the future. When the resort is running, Ployce said dreamily one evening, maybe we can build a second one. We could build a small chain. You and I, partners for life. Helmut barely dared to hope that she meant more than just business partners, but the way she looked at him, the way she held his hand, suggested something deeper. They also became intimate. It began at a dinner when they had drunk too much wine, and she kissed him properly for the first time. Later that night, they went to his apartment, and despite the age difference, despite Helmut's insecurities about his 71-year-old body, she was tender and seemingly genuine in her affection. "Age means nothing, Helmut," she whispered to him. "You are the man who respects me, who invests in my dreams, who treats me like a partner. That is what matters." Helmut felt like a young man. For the first time in decades, he felt alive, important, loved. But then things began to change. About 6 weeks after the final transfer, Helmut noticed that Ploy's updates became less frequent. Where she had previously sent photos and videos of the construction progress every day, now 3 or 4 days sometimes passed without a message. When he asked for updates, she always had excuses. The workers had worked slowly that week. There had been delays with the delivery of materials. She had been so busy with permits and paperwork. He suggested several times that they visit the construction site, but Ploy always resisted. "It is not ready for you to see yet, Helmut. I want your first real impression to be perfect when everything is finished. But I invested 450,000 euros. I think I have the right to see the progress, even if it is incomplete." "Of course you have the right," she said quickly, her voice soothing. "Next week, I promise. I will take you there next week." But next week came, and there was a new excuse. Her mother was sick, and she had to go to her home village for a few days. Their romantic relationship also cooled. Where she had previously stayed with him almost every night, she now came less often. "I am so stressed with the project, darling. I need some space to focus." Helmut tried to be understanding, but a gnawing doubt began to grow in his stomach. Then came the phone call that made everything collapse. It was a German expat named Werner, whom Helmut had met at a regular gathering. Werner called and said, "Helmut, I need to talk to you. I heard that you are working on a resort project with a woman named Ploy. Is that right?" "Yes, why?" "Because I heard a very similar story from another German who lived here 2 years ago. He also invested in a resort project with a young Thai woman. She took his money and disappeared. He never got a cent back." "The description of the woman sounds suspiciously similar to your Ploy." Helmut's heart began to race. "Are you sure?" "I am not 100% sure that it is the same person, but the details are too similar to be a coincidence. Young Thai woman, real estate projects, large sums of money." "Helmut, I hope I am wrong, but you should be very careful." After the call, Helmut tried to reach Ploy. She did not answer. He sent messages. Offline, not read. He called several times. Straight to voicemail. Panic began to set in. The next morning, he took a taxi to the address she had given him for her real estate office. When he arrived, he found an empty storefront with a "For Rent" sign in the window. The owner of the neighboring shop said in English, "This room has been empty for 6 months. No real estate office here." Helmut's hands trembled. He drove to the address Ploy had given him as her apartment. It was an apartment building, but the security guard said he knew no one named Nathaman or Ploy. With growing horror, Helmut finally drove to the plot of land where their resort was supposedly being built. The GPS coordinates led him to an abandoned piece of land, overgrown with weeds and littered with garbage. There was no construction work, no foundation, no building materials, no sign that anyone had ever built anything here. Helmut got out of the taxi, and walked across the land. His legs felt weak, his chest tight. This could not be true. He had seen photos of the progress. He had received updates about the work. But as he looked around, the truth was undeniable. The photos must have been from somewhere else, perhaps a real construction site Ploy had access to, which she had filmed and photographed to make him believe it was his project. He tried to call her again. The number was now dead. Not even voicemail anymore. He opened her line profile. User not found. Facebook. Her profile was deleted. Every digital trace of Nathaman Ploy Suisakate had disappeared. Helmut sat down on the dusty ground in the middle of that empty plot and began to cry. Real, deep sobs that came from a place of deep despair he had not even known existed inside him. 450,000 euros. More than half of his entire fortune, the money he had earned through 40 years of hard work, through the sale of the company that had been his life's work, all gone. Stolen by a woman whose real name he would probably never know, who had manipulated him with surgical precision, who knew exactly which emotional buttons to press. His loneliness, his need for recognition, his pride as a businessman, his longing for meaning. The next day, Helmut went to the police in Pattaya. A police officer, who spoke some English, took his statement, his face becoming increasingly sympathetic as Helmut told the story. "Do you have all the documents?" the officer asked. Helmut showed him everything on his phone. The transfer receipts, the contracts, the construction plans, the photos of Ploy, the communication between them. The officer examined the documents carefully and sighed. "Mr. Schneider, these documents are forgeries. Do you see this stamp here? That is not the correct stamp for the provincial authority. And this license number for the architect, wrong format. Can you find her? I have photos. I have her phone number, her line ID. We will try, but the name is probably false. The phone number is a prepaid card bought with a false ID. The bank account was probably opened with a stolen or borrowed identity. By now, the money has already been moved several times. Very difficult to trace. So I get nothing back." The officer looked at him with sincere compassion. "Probably not. I am sorry. These scams are very professional. They do this many times. They know how to disappear. We will make a report, but honestly, the chances are very low." Helmut left the police station in a state of numbness. He returned to his apartment and tried to calculate how bad the situation really was. Of his original 800,000 euros, he had given 450,000 to Ploy. He had spent money on rent, living expenses, and various costs since arriving in Thailand. That left him with about 320,000 euros. No, wait. More precisely, he checked his bank accounts. After all transfers and expenses, he had exactly 160,000 euros. 160,000 euros at the age of 71 in a foreign country. He called his daughter Petra. It was evening in Hamburg. She answered, on the third ring, sounding tired. "Papa, is everything all right?" And then he told her everything. The resort project, Ploy, the empty plot of land, the 450,000 euros that had disappeared. A long silence followed, then her voice, cold and angry. "Papa, I warned you. I told you there were scammers in Thailand. How could you be so stupid? I thought it was real. I thought we were building something together. You gave a woman you had known for 2 months €500,000. How can anyone be so naive? Petra, please. I need support, not criticism. Support? Papa, I cannot help you financially. We have our own problems. And honestly, after all the years when you ignored us, I am not sure why I should help you now. She hung up. Helmut sat alone in his apartment, stared at the wall, and realized the full extent of what had happened. He had not only lost his money, he had lost his dignity, his pride, his self-respect. He had proven that his children were right. He was a foolish old man. The weeks after the discovery passed in a fog of shock and depression. Helmut had to make practical decisions about his survival. His apartment in Yamtian, which cost 20,000 baht per month, was no longer affordable. He found a small room in a run-down building in Pattaya for 5,000 baht a month, about €135. The room was tiny, hardly larger than a prison cell, with a bed, a small refrigerator, a fan, and a shared bathroom at the end of the hallway. The neighbors were a mixture of failed expats, long-term tourists, and questionable characters. He also had to drastically reduce his daily expenses. No more restaurants, no expensive Western food. He ate cheap Thai dishes on the street for 30 or 40 baht. Often, he ate only once a day to save money. With €160,000 and a monthly pension of €2,500, Helmut could survive if he was extremely careful. But the comfortable retirement he had imagined was over. He would spend the rest of his life counting every baht, worrying that an unexpected medical bill or emergency would push him into absolute poverty. The German expat community in Pattaya was surprisingly supportive. Many had similar stories, though not on the same scale. They formed an informal support group and met weekly at a cheap local restaurant to share their experiences and remind each other that they were not alone. "Welcome to the Club of the Betrayed," a man named Klaus Bitter said at Helmut's first meeting. "We are all here because we were too lonely to think clearly." The police investigation went exactly as the officer had predicted. They found 3 women named Nathaman Suisakate in their systems. None matched the woman Helmut knew. The bank account had been closed, the money distributed into dozens of different accounts throughout Southeast Asia. This was a very professional operation, the officer told him at a follow-up meeting. They have done this many times before and know how to cover their tracks. I am very sorry, but we cannot recover your money. 2 years have passed since Helmut stood on that empty piece of land in Thailand. He is now 73 years old and still lives in that tiny room in Pattaya. He survives on his German pension and occasional odd jobs when he can find them. His health has worsened. Decades of physical labor have taken their toll, and now, without the means for proper medical care, he suffers from chronic pain in his back and knees. He cannot afford the expensive German or international hospitals, so always goes to local clinics where communication is difficult and the treatment is basic. His relationship with his children is irreparably broken. Sabine and Marcus have not spoken to him since the phone call in which he told them about the scam. Petra occasionally sends short emails, mostly out of a sense of duty, but there is no warmth, no real connection. He thinks about Ploy every day, not with affection, but with a kind of morbid fascination. Was anything about their relationship real? Did she ever feel even a moment of genuine affection for him, Or was every smile, every touch, every loving word pure calculation? He will never know. The police never found her. She is probably operating under a new name, targeting the next lonely foreign man with savings and dreams. Helmut has become a warning story in the expat community. New arrivals are told, do not be like Helmut. Do not give your money to someone you barely know. Do not trust a beautiful face and professional documents. He accepts his role as a warning. If his story saves even one person from making the same catastrophic mistake, then perhaps his suffering has a purpose. What Helmut learned at a price of 450,000 euros and his entire retirement security is that loneliness makes us vulnerable in ways that bypass intelligence and experience. He was not a stupid man. He had successfully run a company for 40 years. He understood how the business world worked. But none of that protected him, because what Ploy exploited was not his mind, but his heart. She found his deepest need, the need to matter, to be respected, to be loved, and she used it with surgical precision. She did not only steal his money, she stole the dignity he had built through 4 decades of hard work. She stole the comfortable retirement he had earned. She stole the future he had imagined with her. Helmut Schneider now sits in his small room while another tropical evening falls over Pattaya, the sounds of motorcycles and street vendors drifting through his window. He is 73 years old, surviving on his pension in a room that can hardly be considered livable, eating once a day to save money, and waiting for life to end. This is not the retirement he imagined when he sold his life's work and moved to Thailand. This is not the future he saw when he met Ploy and thought he had finally found someone who recognized his worth. He wanted to die in luxury. Instead, he fought to survive. And every day, he makes the decision to keep going, to find small joys where he can, and to survive with the dignity that still remains to him. If this story's touched you, or if you know someone who should hear it, I would be very happy if you subscribe to this channel. These stories are real. They happen every day, and they destroy lives. Your support helps me document these cases and protect others from making the same mistakes. Thank you for listening to Helmut Schneider's story. Thank you for being here.